On today's show, we continue our prospect pool rankings. We're finally in the top 5. We'll look at Columbus, Anaheim, and Chicago on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Patty Kellekesh, QMJHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospects with Sebastian High, USHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we're finally in the top 5 of our prospect pool rankings. We're going to be looking at Columbus at number 5 here in our first segment. We'll be looking at Anaheim in the second segment at number 4. And then we'll be looking at Chicago, our number 3 prospect pool in the NHL. At number 3 with our final segment there. But before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you thought of the episode, what you think of our rankings, and what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started right away here with Columbus at number 5, and I don't think there's really much of a debate here at number 1 in their prospect pool, and it's Cayden Lindstrom here at number 1, recently selected at 4th overall in the 2024 NHL draft. Talk me through the towering center's game and what makes him so special.
He is all tools. He's highly intelligent, and he has about as much runway as you could possibly hope for a player that's already drafted. He's 6'3". It's a very much a natural center, in my opinion. Like, maybe he gets developed on the wing, but I think with all of his tools and the way that he thinks the game, he will be a centerman at the NHL level. And beyond that, he's offensively gifted. He's a genuine triple threat. I mean, with his puck handling, his passing ability, playmaking, as well as a goal scoring, he makes a difference in just about any possible way in the offensive zone. He's a really good skater, despite being a really big guy. And he's also just physically dominant, despite being like about the nicest person that you could possibly hope to meet off the ice. He's not the first person that you want to see on the ice if you're playing against him. He plays a pesty style of game on the ice. And last season with Medicine Hat, he missed a decent chunk of the season to injury, but still scored 27 goals and 46 points in 32 games. This is a guy who will need a couple years of development before he can really be at a top 6 NHL centerman. Give him time, give him patience. I think as the development trajectory is probably more along the lines of like a Quinton Byfield, where the first maybe 2-3 seasons after being picked might not be like a top 6 center right off the bat, but he's a more than worthwhile investment, and I think that Columbus is certainly going to reap the benefits of having selected him in this spot, and being able to run a combination of Adam Fantilli and Cayden Lindstrom down the middle long term is a real luxury.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I also think that with Cayden Lindstrom, what's so interesting is, yes, he has a triple threat in terms of tools, stick handling, shooting, and passing. There's a more important mental triple threat, which is intelligence, adaptability, and motor, and he has all 3 of those as well. He has some warts to iron out in terms of his decision-making, in terms of his positioning, but overall, the mental tools and the physical tools are there. He has basically everything in order to succeed. I'm excited to see how he progresses, but we have some other prospects in this pool as well. Denton Mateychuk comes in at number 2 here for the Columbus Blue Jackets. A dynamic player from the blue line, an aggressive, confident blue liner with really high-end hockey sense and passing ability. He's really smart. He can see passing lanes that no one else can see, and he has the tools in order to connect on those passes. So he's an incredible distributor from the blue line. He's also incredibly confident in his ability to move up the ice. I've seen him retrieve his own dump-ins, start the cycle on his own, win some time for his teammates to change and get some fresh bodies out on the ice. He has that great awareness in order to know when to do that as well. And I think he's even polished his ability to kind of select his to pick his moments, right? To go ahead and start those dump-ins and retrievals and all that, and get aggressive offensively. He's not always pushing up the ice. He knows when to do it, when not to do it. An incredibly smart defenseman. 5'11", 195 pounds, so not on the bigger side, but he's still able to throw his weight around decently well. He's got a good shot from the blue line. He's got good hands as well. Drafted 12th overall in 2022 and has progressed really well since then. 75 points in 52 games for Moose Shaw in his draft plus 2 year. So he's been progressing really, really well as well.
And
let's move on
he even got into 4 AHL playoff games at the end of the season where he got 3 assists, which isn't half bad.
Absolutely. Let's move on to number 3 now with Gavin Brindley, a favorite of both of ours, who's playing kind of second fiddle to Adam Fantilli in the University of Michigan. And I'm still glad he went in the first round there. He went in the second round very, very early, but he's basically a first round. It was drafted 34th overall in the 2023 NHL draft. And in terms of motor, in terms of defensive ability, he's up there with the best in this draft, on top of having a high-end skating stride as well, right?
Absolutely. He's so pacey. And I think in his draft year, one question that a lot of us had was, can he dial it back sometimes? Because he's always going at 110%. And since being drafted, he's very much integrated that into his game, which has made him a lot more dynamic offensively, being able to switch gears and not always go 110%, but being able to access that to blow past defenders when they're probably not expecting it at a given point, when he can catch them flat-footed. And as you mentioned, he was dominant last season with the University of Michigan alongside Frank Nazar and Rutger McGroarty. That was a dominant line. He scored 25 goals and 53 points in 40 games. Even had his first NHL game at the end of the season. And he's a player that, as you mentioned, is a real spark plug despite being undersized. And that high-end skating ability is definitely something that's going to facilitate his road to the NHL compared to other undersized spark plug type of players that we've covered so far in this series that we also like a lot, but who may lack that mobility, which is definitely one of the reasons that Brindley has already logged an NHL game at 19 years of age and may well be a 40-plus game NHLer this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think what's so interesting with Brindley is despite being 5'9", 175 pounds, he's one of the most physically proficient players in the NCAA. Well, he was last year. He's probably going to be an NHLer this time next year. But yeah, overall, I think that's what's so interesting with Brindley is he overcomes his lack of pure high-end physicality with really, really good physical tools. He can handle physical battles. He can outmuscle players that are 6'3", 6'4", down low. He can, shake them off. He can use his low center of gravity to win battles. That's what makes him so interesting is you need those physical tools in order to be effective at that size in the NHL. And Brindley is probably one of the best outside the NHL in terms of these undersized players at using his frame that way. But we also have Charlie Elick, number 4, which is basically the polar opposite of Gavin Brindley. A massive hulking right-handed defenseman. He's 6'3", 200 pounds, was recently drafted at 36 overall in the 2024 NHL draft. And his progression has been decent. He went under half a point a game in the WHL, but points aren't really why you're drafting Elick. It's really for his combination of high-end mobility, high-end physicality. The physical tools with him are off the charts, and he's one of the best rush defenders and rush suppressors overall from the 2024 NHL draft. I really like his game. I grew fond of his game over the year. I initially wasn't a fan because I like my defenseman to have a bit of offensive punch, but he showed a bit. I started to like his passing ability. I started to like his distribution skill. But overall, Elick, you're mainly drafting him for his ability to just be a punishing, suffocating force on the back end for you, to just suppress anything that comes his way. Kind of Cayden coded in that sense with maybe a bit less offense and a bit
Braden
more
Schneider,
kind of...
perhaps?
Yeah, Braden Schneider, I'd say, is a better comparison. Yeah, just a violent, physical, but really good skating player. I really like the defensive upside with Charlie Elick. And then at number 5 here, we have Stanislav Svozil. Take it away on him and what's made him so interesting in his progression over the years, because he's 21 now, was drafted 4 years ago already. Talk me through his game.
Yeah, he's a player I actually appreciated a lot in his draft year already. He fell all the way to the 3rd round in 2021 after a subpar U18 World Championship performance, which, if you're a European prospect, that definitely can tank your draft stock completely. And in his draft year, he was already one of the best transition defenders available in that class, and he's only further refined that ability since being selected, while also layering in a lot more deception and dynamism in his on-puck game and offensive implications. He's an intelligent player, a really solid puck handler, handler, an underrated shot as well. I mean, the goal that he scored against Team Canada at the World Junior Championships like 2 years ago, off the rush, was stunning. And he's been developing well in the AHL last season after a couple seasons with the Regina Pats alongside Connor Bedard. And he's really adapted well to the professional style of game. He has a decent frame at 6'1" and 182 pounds. And combine that with the mobility and the intelligence, he's just so consistently well positioned, and a player that I think is going to crack the NHL in some capacity, whether that be as a number 4 or number 5 remains to be seen, but I definitely think that's the range, and it's a pretty decent shot that he will make that at the end of the day. But there's a lot of other players in this prospect pool for Columbus that I couldn't quite crack our top 5 that we're still very big fans of. Now, I'm a particularly big fan of Luca Pinelli. Watched him live like his entire OHL career, basically, with the Ottawa 67s. I was there for his first ever OHL game, and his progression since being picked has also been fantastic. He scored 50 goals in the OHL last year, and while being the go-to offensive driver with the 67s. Highly intelligent, wicked release, decent puck handler. The defensive game can still go a little ways, but with his intelligence, his ability to read the game, I think he's going to be able to adapt very nicely. And he's a bit undersized. He'll probably need a little bit of time to develop, especially because, unlike Gavin Brindley, he's not a really high-end skater, but a player that I'm definitely rooting for, and I think will have a shot at becoming a middle six piece for Columbus in a couple years' time. But James Malatesta's in a very similar boat. He could even crack the team out of camp this season. He almost did last year as well. Jordan Dumais is the best perimeter playmaker that we've seen in this CHL in recent seasons. And the question is, how much more is there to his game that he'll actually be able to translate to the professional level? Luca Del Belbaluz and William Whitelaw add some offensive punch and offensive instincts. But there's one player that I actually want to hand over to you here, in Corson Kuhlman's a guy that you've been tracking very closely since being drafted. So how has he progressed?
Well, he's certainly progressed, maybe not to the amount that I thought he would. There's some decent kind of tools in his game overall. He's a decent puck carrier. He's a decent shooter from the blue line, really heavy shot. Great hands as well. He's got some physical play as well to his game, 6'2", 200 pounds. But overall, his progression has kind of held him back a tiny bit. His year in the AHL this past year, 12 points and 47 games, wasn't really able to crack full-time top pair or top, number 3 minutes. But overall, I think he's still got some decent upside on him. If he continues to add some arrows to his quiver and continue to progress in that sense, I think he's got some decent tools there. But we're running out of time. There's a couple more players I want to mention here. Sergei Ivanov in goal is a really interesting prospect that could develop really well. Incredible numbers in the KHL, was their playoff MVP. Ridiculous stuff from a 20-year-old there. And Luca Morelli as well was another right-handed defenseman who's been looking really good, really well in recent years. But that's it for our first segment. We'll get into our second segment here, where we talk about Anaheim and their prospect pool at number 4. Just before, a quick word from our sponsors at Indeed and Game Time. We're driven by the search for better here at Locked On, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match instead with Indeed. If you need to hire, Indeed is the best place to get it done. It's your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. You can ditch the busy work and use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging all in one place, so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. What I like about Indeed, as someone who got his day job through Indeed, is for employees, it's really straightforward and simple. You know exactly what the criteria are, you know exactly what the qualifications are, what your qualities need to be, and you know what the salary range is, so there's no surprises, and you can make the best decision for your career. So I can only imagine how much easier it is for employers to connect with employees that way. So you can get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/lockedon to get your jobs more visibility. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. You should just go there right now and support our show by saying you've heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply, but if you need to hire, you need Indeed. If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute to any event, Game Time is the best place to secure them. Game Time is safe, secure, and super easy to use, and they've got a bunch of deals to help you save money. They've got flash deals, zone deals, last minute deals, and the Game Time guarantee makes sure you always get the best price for your tickets. If you find a ticket in the same section and row for less than what Game Time has to offer you, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And they've got a new feature called All-In Pricing, which you can toggle in order to see the final price after taxes, after fees, when you're looking at the tickets. That way there's no surprises when you go go to pay, and you can make the best decision for your wallet. I love Game Time because it's something that works really well with my schedule, which changes around a ton. So anytime I've got an afternoon free and a bit of spare change, I can just pull up Game Time, see what events are in my area, and just go ahead and access those. Tickets are available up until the last minute before an event starts, and even sometimes an hour after the event starts. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, super simple. You just create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. So download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alrighty, so let's move on to segment number 2 with the Anaheim Ducks here and their deep prospect pool. We're going to be looking at a lot of decent prospects. And notice they tend to not shy away from the queue. They've got a decent couple of prospects in here that's drafted out of the QMJHL. But let's start at the top here with an NCAA prospect that basically forced his way to Anaheim, and Cutter Gauthier at number 1. It was a difficult conversation at 1 between him and the next prospect here, but let's start off with Gauthier. I mean, he's a well-rounded offensive player with, I'd say, a leaning for shots, but he's not at all a slouch playmaking wise or stick handling wise. He's got that triple threat down pat as well. He's grown in his responsibility defensively. He's got a really high motor. He's able to push through contact. He's got a physical frame that works really well with a skill set. And he's pretty speedy as well. He's got the power forward elements that you look for in a forward. So, even though the next prospect on this list is fairly well, Cutter Gauthier, his sure value is just next level. I think that he's almost definitely going to be a second liner in the NHL moving forward. And with this season, possibly, yeah. I mean, the amount of talent that the Ducks have going up the pipeline is amazing. Even with Leo Carlson officially having graduated, this is still, and Pavel Mintyukov, this is still an amazing prospect pool and deserves to be in the top 4. But let's talk about the next guy, a guy that, I mean, they shocked everyone, including him, by picking him at 3rd overall in the 2024 NHL draft. Beckett Sennecke comes in at number 2. What do you think about his game?
I mean, I definitely think he had a strong case to be at number 1 on this board. Like the 2 top prospects for Anaheim are just fantastic as a really good 1-2 punch that also bring a real variety of tools while both being, I guess, power forward mold of players, and probably more comfortable on the wing for both of them than at center. But Beckett Sennecke has grown 5 inches in the last year, something absurd, and he's still getting used to his frame. But the level of puck handling ability that he has, the level of intelligence, the physicality that he brings on the forecheck, he's constantly engaged. He's never going to be roaming around the ice doing nothing. He's also a fantastic passer and really good shooter. He's do it all offensive forward, and we definitely saw that come into his own, especially in the playoffs for the Oshawa Generals last season. He took the team on his back and dragged them to the OHL finals, which he missed due to injury, unfortunately, which did lead to London sweeping them very, very quickly. But he was a player that I think deservedly pushed his way up everyone's boards towards the tail end of last year's draft cycle, and his trajectory is very promising. So while there are still a lot more question marks with him and his overall profile and development than with other players drafted in a couple slots after him, I still think this was a really interesting calculated risk for the Anaheim Ducks, and I definitely think it's going to pay off, especially if you pair him with players of the molds of Mason McTavish and Leo Carlson and Cutter Gauthier moving forward. There's a lot of players there that I think are going to work really, really nicely in tandem with Beckett Sennecke. But the other player they selected in the first round is another one that I'm a massive fan of, that I had ranked top 15, I believe, on my final board. And that's Stian Solberg, a violent left shot defenseman who's a really fantastic skater and dominated the Norwegian Pro League last season, which is not the best competition. Having slogged through many viewings of that last year, I can attest to that certainly. But he's shown so brightly as well at the World Championships. There's a lot of runway for him in his development in his on-puck game as well. There've been flashes of really dynamic on-puck game and puck rushes and offensive activation, and really becoming a goal threat as well in the offensive zone. At the World Championships, he was fantastic for Norway. He was their best blue liner, and he was playing some fantastic hockey against some scrubs like Connor Bedard and other guys that you may not have heard of, and really made his mark there. So I thought that he was fantastic value at 23rd overall for the Ducks. But another defensive prospect who's very interesting, and that you're also very familiar with your eye constantly on the queue, in Tristan Luneau. He also got into 7 NHL games last season, but his progression since being drafted has been second to none.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't the biggest fan of his game overall in this draft year. He had kind of below average hockey sense, wasn't a particularly strong skater. I thought that he struggled in terms of decision making defensively. And when you're coming out of the queue with those specific weaknesses, they don't usually tend to develop properly. But props to Luneau. His defensive game progressed a decent amount. His reads progressed a really good amount. Um, He's also become a bit more physical as well. He's clocked in at 290 pounds, but I think the way he leverages his weight, the way he uses his frame on retrievals is really interesting as well. As a right shot defenseman, 20 years old, already gotten 7 NHL games in his career. I think there's decent room for progression there, and he could end up being a really decent prospect for the Ducks. And they picked him at 53rd overall in 2022. He went about where I thought he would go.
Yeah.
So not surprised at all by that. But we also have a bona fide goalie prospect in the top 5 here for Anaheim, and Damian Clara. His progression has been fantastic over the past year. He dominated the Allsvenskan with 34 games, 2.23 goals against average, and a 913 save percentage. I think his stock is going to rise massively once he plays for Italy at the Olympics. That's really
Yeah.
when teams are going to see like, oh wow, this guy's a player. But overall, he's got decent mobility at 6'6", 214 pounds. It's already a great foundation for a goalie. Yet on top of that, the reaction time, the transitions between postures that he uses, the technique that he has as well. It's a really interesting skill set. And at 19, drafted 60th overall in 2023, there's decent runway there as well. And then we have a bunch of honorable mentions: Tyson Hines, Nathan Gaucher from the Q, Rodwin Dionicio from the OHL as well, Ian Moore, Sam Colangelo, Yegor Sidorov, Terrence Smith, Maxime Massé also from the Q, Noah Warren also from the Q. I mean, you can see the tendencies there. There's Niko Mijatovic, who I'm still not sure should have been picked as high as he was, but it's
Yeah.
Anaheim. I'm going to trust them with their scouting. They're really good at that. And a couple more in Carey Terrence and Colson Petro. So you've got a decent amount of depth with really high end upside at the top end. Unfortunately, they just couldn't beat out Chicago here at number 3. And we're going to get into that in just a second. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors here at FanDuel.
Hey NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats and even the live play-by-play and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. Whether you want to take your big swings on American football or even European football, now with the Champions League in full swing and the first match day now in the rear view of the new format of that going on, or of course all the big leagues are also getting started, whether it's the Premier League, the La Liga, the Bundesliga. There's a lot to get excited for, and maybe you're not a European or American football fan and you prefer tennis or golf. FanDuel has everything for any kind of sports fan. That is FanDuel.com.
All right, so let's close things off here with Chicago at number 3. We're going to be looking at their prospect pool in detail, and no, Connor Bedard is not eligible for this because he's played over 41 games. If he was eligible, this would probably be closer to number 1. But overall, even with Connor Bedard gone, there's still a very, very decent amount of prospects, of really good prospects in this pool, including a bunch of really interesting projects that Chicago added in the 2024 NHL draft. Let's start off at number 1 with with their first edition from the 2024 draft, Artyom Levshunov, who got picked at 2nd overall. This game's fairly interesting. I mean, he's a prospect who came out of Belarusian hockey, played a year in the USHL, then graduated to the NCAA pretty much last minute with Michigan State. And has progressed really well there. Started off as a player who had some really, really difficult moments in terms of reads and decisions. I think you can attest to that as well, Sebastian. But as the season went on and his game progressed, I mean, by leaps and bounds, by the end of the year, he was the best prospect on a pretty good team in Michigan State. Dominant from the blue line, 6'3", 200 pounds. He can move like the wind. He's got a decent physical frame on him as well. He started reading plays really well in terms of rush defense, in terms of in-zone defense, which helped his progression a ton. And overall, just really progressed in his ability to move the puck up the ice and make offensive plays, right?
Absolutely. He's gotten the amount of progression that we've seen in this game, not just in the last year, which has already been massive, but in the last 2-3 years. I mean, he was playing U18 Belarusian hockey just a couple seasons ago and is now going to be contending for a spot in an NHL lineup. And if not, he'll be playing in the AHL already. So as you mentioned, the tools are fantastic. There's definitely still some work to be done on his reading of the game. I think especially his on-puck game could still use a little bit of a fine-tuning in his read of his teammates and when to take risks, for instance, because we did see a lot of breakaways going the other way with Michigan State last season, where Levshunov was kind of at the core of what went wrong in the offensive zone. But the risks more than often outweighed any potential net losses. And I think that he's very toolsy. And with his trajectory and the hands-on development that he's going to get with Chicago, while also being groomed as the number one defenseman long-term in all likelihood, is definitely going to aid his development. And yeah, I think he's a fantastic prospect. Number two is perhaps a little bit rich for my blood, but we knew that was going to happen going into the draft. And in terms of his profile as a right-shot defenseman, he was the player to take if you're the Chicago Blackhawks, because I think if you're running Kevin Korchinski and Zane Parekh as a first pairing long term, you're going to let in some goals, and Levshunov's gonna help on the defensive side a little bit more. But there's a lot of exciting forward prospects in this pool as well, despite lacking Connor Bedard being eligible. And Frank Nazar is a guy that both of us have been massive fans of for the longest of times. I know some of our first prospect conversations were just raving about how awesome he was at hockey. He's a fantastic skater, great goal scorer, one of the better rush creators outside the NHL. I mean, he did get into 3 NHL games last season where he did score a rush goal, shocker. And he's intelligent, a really good puck handler. And despite missing his basically entire D+1 season almost for the University of Michigan, he's rebounded so well. He won a point a game last season in college, signed his ELC, and is going to be contending for a top 6 spot in the lineup this season. I think he's so intelligent, and he'll be a fantastic complement to Connor Bedard. Despite being of a similar frame, he brings so much pace, so much intensity on top of that high-end offensive skill that I think those two are going to let it up for a very, very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And his motor's fantastic as well. I mean, I think that goes underrated in his game, but he's just pedal to the metal all the time. And he has, absolutely. And speaking of which, Oliver Moore comes in at number 3, and he's also a very interesting prospect. He's one of the best skaters outside the NHL. Fantastic skating stride, incredibly powerful stride. If you want to think of a comparable in the NHL, I don't like comparables, but with Oliver Moore, it's just so easy to compare him to Dylan Larkin. It's the exact same player, basically. High-end skating ability, powerful stride, great playmaker. He's got some whip to his shot as well. He had a difficult first half to his NCAA campaign, but really picked it up in the second half and showed his chops in that league. Defensively responsible, incredibly smart. There's just so much that works really well for him. And I had my doubts at the start of the year because I thought, I was looking at Moore and seeing a guy whose feet were moving faster than his brain. But by the end of his draft year, he really looked like the two were in perfect sync. And that's what you need from a fast player. You don't want your fast players to be thinking too fast, because then you get Michael Grabner who gets 10 breakaways a game, but misses all of them. Right. But yeah, overall, Oliver Moore has some decent skill and should develop well. We also have Sacha Boisvert in the pool, kind of basically the opposite, a low pace, low speed, kind of a below average skater, but with incredible offensive tools, a heavy shot, great playmaking skill as well, defensively responsible in terms of his positioning. The skating does need to come a bit of a ways, but the physical tools, the power forward elements combined with the high-end shot that he has, I think he's got really high upside. I think he could develop into a top 6 forward in the NHL. In terms of power forward molds, he ticks basically all the boxes I'm looking for except for speed. So I think he's a decent prospect as well. And they have a decent goalie prospect as well in Adam Gajan in the pool. Decent kind of athletic, aggressive goaltender. Not necessarily the most polished yet. I mean, he was playing NAHL hockey in his draft year, which isn't ideal, but he's progressed fairly well. He's shown some decent tools as well. He looks like a decent goalie prospect as well. So let's get into the honorable mentions right now, because there's a long-winded list of really interesting projects, including the likes of John Mustard and AJ Spellici and those kinds of guys. Talk me through your favorites in this list here.
Oof, there's a lot of them. I think Ethan Del Mastro is going to be a really interesting defensive prospect for the Blackhawks. 6'4", 210 pounds. He's already gotten into 2 NHL games as well, following a really solid rookie campaign with the Rockford Ice Hogs in the AHL last season, where he logged 37 points in 69 games. Beyond him, Sam Renzel is a really mobile, offensively gifted physical defenseman who's a right shot, who's progressed very nicely at the NCAA level with the University of Minnesota. Nick Lardis is a fantastic goal scorer in the OHL, and a player that I've always really enjoyed to watch with the Brantford Bulldogs. He scored 29 goals and 50 points in 37 games as a D+1 last season. He combines that elite level shot with a really high end hockey sense and really plus level mobility as well, which helps a lot with his undersized frame. Beyond them, Marek Vanacker is another really skilled player who wasn't really quite able to show the extent of his offensive upside last season as a teammate of Nick Lardis's, because he was fighting through an injury all year long that he only got operated on at the end of the year. And Chicago took a big swing on him in the first round. I believe they traded up for that selection as well. They really, really wanted to add him into their pool and add a lot of pace and skill from the wing. He scored 82 points in 68 games last season, but yeah, there's a lot of pieces here. I know you like John Mustard quite a bit, but there's a lot of names. Ryan Green's been fantastic with Boston University at the NCAA level. Martin Mishiak's interesting. Gavin Hayes is a solid prospect. There's a lot of depth here. And I know AJ Spellacy is one of your favorites as well from last year's draft class as a real under-the-radar guy that worked his way up a lot of boards and was deservingly picked in the middle rounds at the end of the day.
Yeah, he's so interesting. He was playing football up until a certain amount. You could see it in his playing style. He's a
linebacker on the ice, 100%.
Yeah. Incredible speed at his size as well. Just ridiculous. But yeah, we're running out of time here, so we're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our future shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the months of September and finish off our prospect pool rankings in Monday's episode. Stay tuned. This has been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.